Hi, how you doing? It's nice to be here. I'm going to talk about medical cannabis pain and opioid overdoses, things we're all very interested in. Okay, so let's start with the studies that we have. You've probably seen these studies because they've gotten a lot of press. There's a number of studies showing that in states that have legalized medical cannabis, subsequently the rate at which people overdose on opioids seems lower than we would have expected. There's also some other ones showing that people seem to use less medications. There's even one study saying there's a big drop in alcohol consumption. So what does that mean? What does that mean about states? What does it mean about the interaction of different drugs? So some people think it means this. The best, smartest thing we could do is to expand medical cannabis all over, and then that would not eliminate it, but greatly reduce our opioid overdoses. So this slide is why scientists are no fun at parties. What I want to believe and what I do believe are different. That's one thing about being a scientist. So I've spent my whole career, 30 years, trying to help people who are addicted. I talk to families all the time, and they're just going out of their minds that somebody they love is addicted to opioids. I really, really want this to be true, desperately want it to be true. The thing about the science is that lots of things we want to be true turn out not to be true, and that's why we have to do really good research so we can separate out what we wish for and what is actually the case. And there's a history here that's worth knowing. This is an ad for restorative wine of coca. It comes from about 100 years ago. Just to tell you how various drugs were introduced, it's sort of interesting history. Morphine was originally introduced because it was going to cure alcoholism, as they called it. Cocaine was then popularized because it was going to cure morphine addiction and alcoholism. Subsequent to that, heroin was introduced, claiming that it would cure alcoholism, morphine addiction, and cocaine addiction. And this, if you read the fine here, this basically cures everything, certainly all other addictions. So we've done this before. In the early days of medicine, we thought a new addictive drug is going to drive out an old addictive drug. And generally what's happening is then we get people addicted to the new addictive drug and they're still addicted to the old. That's why we do research, because of this history. So let's think about this critically. How could this be, what is a causal model that can explain why more medical cannabis might reduce opioid? There's different ones you can use, but this is the most commonly invoked, and the one that actually seems most plausible, is that as people with pain conditions consume medical cannabis, then they get pain relief, and that leads them to consume less opioids, and maybe makes them drink less, and maybe makes them take less antidepressants and anxiety. That's the idea. So if that's true, if that's what these studies are proving, then three things have to be true. First, that something in this plant reduces pain. Second, that aggregate relationships have to be replicated in individuals. In other words, when states correlate on something, the people in those states have to correlate on the same thing. And the last, since these are correlational studies, the correlations prove causality. So I'm just going to go through which one of these. I'll start with the first one. Does the cannabis plant reduce pain? Yeah, there is some evidence on that. The cannabinoid receptor system, probably evolutionarily, is the oldest one in the body, or one of the oldest. It's distributed, it's not just in the brain, it's through the body. It seems to have some role in pain regulation, which we do not understand very well. But there is one review that looks at 27 trials and says there's at least low-strength evidence that cannabis helps on neuropathic pain. A more recent review just came out as more negative. But it's certainly plausible, and it's definitely worth checking out further. So we should be studying that more. Maybe it's true. I'll talk at the end about maybe some ways we could have more of that research. We definitely need it. But I point out that even if this is true, you wouldn't expect it to change the opioid epidemic very much, because there's already over 100 non-opioid medications that affect pain. So it's unlikely that the 101st could then lead to a big change. So the second thing is aggregate relationships have to be replicated in individuals. When Colorado does something, then you can assume that about everybody in Colorado. So I'm going to show this through, this is a real example of baseball. So on your left, David Justice, much admired because he's Halle Berry. Also played sports. On your right, Derek Jeter, played for the Yankees. So evil, but good hitter. Okay, this is real data. Okay, this is their an example of aggregation. So this is their real batting averages for 3 years in a row. And as you can see, David Justice has a higher batting average in each individual season. You see, this is real. So then the question is, so who had the best average overall across those 3 seasons? The answer is Derek Jeter. This is not some underhanded trick. This is math. And the reason that's true is, something we often forget in aggregation, is the seasons where Derek Jeter hit really well, he had a lot more at-bats. And so when you add everything up, it turns out that he's actually better in the aggregate. He's a better hitter than Dave Justice, even though every individual season was worse. And that's called an ecological fallacy. And these are very well known in epidemiology. What it means is plenty of things correlate in the aggregate that don't correlate at the individual level, and sometimes the actual correlations go the other way. So here, I mean, there's many of these very famous. Here's some of my favorite ones. The middle one is, the regions in France with the highest rates of smoking have the lowest rates of esophageal cancer. Okay, that doesn't prove that smoking cures cancer. The counties in the United States with the highest level of radon exposure have the lowest level of lung cancer. Again, that doesn't prove that an individual who's exposed to radon is less likely to get lung cancer. And this is pretty much taught in every epidemiology class, probably the first course they would teach you this thing, but we've overlooked it in this literature. The last thing is that correlations have to reflect a causal relationship. In other words, lots of things correlate because they're cause. And I just say about that, you have to say correlations either prove cause or they don't. It is true in the states with medical cannabis, we have a correlation showing negative towards opioid overdoses. But there's a lot of other correlations in the literature too. People who use medical cannabis, in addition to opioids, use more opioids than those who don't. We know that medical cannabis users use more prescriptions and misuse more prescriptions than non-users. We know that over time, people who are interviewed who are using cannabis 10 years and 10 years later are more likely to be having an opioid problem. Those are all correlations too. So if you're going to dismiss these three, then you have to dismiss that one, and vice versa. And so, again, this is a science thing. You just got to be logically consistent. We can't say, well, that correlation supports what I want to be true, so I'm going to say that's proof of cause. This one doesn't, so I'm not going to say that's just a correlation. It's all correlation. Okay, so here we are. And these three things that have to be true. Something in the cannabis plant has to reduce pain. Probably true, or at least maybe true. Aggregate relationships have to be replicated in individuals, definitely not true. Correlations have to produce cause. You really have to go all in on that one way or the other. And if you do, you get in this weird situation where, say, cannabis both causes and stops opioids. So here's what the editors of Addiction said, of which I am one, but this was signed by all the editors. This is the most read addiction journal in the world. All human beings are susceptible to confirmatory bias. We are inclined to uncritically accept evidence that accords with our pre-existing beliefs. A good example is the preparedness of some researchers to accept weak evidence that increased access to medical cannabis in the USA has reduced opioid overdose deaths in that country. This is where the head and the heart don't line up together, and so we go with the head, at least in science. So we don't really know the answer to this question. And we should stop acting like we do, and we should try to figure out more. And there's good ways to do that. First off, you should treat it like any other medical problem. You approach it at equipoise. In other words, your job when you study something is not to say, I'm going to prove what I've always wanted to be true is true. Instead, you're going to test what you think might be true. If it's wrong, you just let the chips fall where they may. We could change how drugs are scheduled. I think this is actually, at least one congressperson proposed this. I wrote about this in the Washington Post. We could have a schedule called 1R for drugs that are in Schedule 1 that we think might have medical utility. And we could say for medical research, they're down-scheduled. They're much easier to get because it's a real pain to try to get cannabis to do research. The last thing is, Congress actually approved more people to do medical research farms. And a lot of people applied to do it, and none of them, those licenses have been granted. You could let that happen, let more people do it. It seems to me as a state, if you're allowed to run a medical marijuana system where you give up everyone, you ought to be able to study whether or not it's working. We could do that and we would learn more. And in the meantime, it's not that we don't have good things to do about the opioid epidemic. We have lots of good things to do. In fact, there's a number of good things in the bill that Congress just passed. But here's some ideas. We've got Dr. Drass here. You can look in the commission report on addiction. Also, at the end of 2016, there's a Surgeon General report on addiction health. We know smart things to do, and that they actually just articulated very well. So it's not as if we're helpless towards this problem. We just need to do things to have evidence behind them. Thanks a lot.